Well, hello, Stacy Murphy here, Brooklyn's backyard farmer, back in Brooklyn this spring with a beautiful bird calling over my shoulder. So I get a lot of questions every year about growing food, and one of the questions I get a lot is, what should I plant where? And oftentimes I respond with another question, which is, what did you grow last year and where did you grow it? And what I'm thinking about is your long-term health of your soil and of your growing site. So here it is, it's spring in the Northern Hemisphere. We're getting started, we're excited. We want to get our plants in the ground as soon as possible. We're going to totally love them up. We're going to water them, we're going to prune them, we're going to trellis our tomatoes, and we're going to eagerly await that abundant harvest at the end of the season. And the reality is that there are critical mistakes that we can be making now which will prevent us from ever enjoying that harvest. And it has to do with pests and diseases. And so when people ask me, what should I grow where? What I'm thinking about are how crop rotations can help you steer clear of some of the big nasty diseases out there. So, make no mistake, you're going to get pests. They're inevitable, and most of them are very manageable. And so you don't need to worry about those quite so much. But there are certain diseases, so instead of like a pest that's kind of like a common cold where you just treat it and it goes away, there are kind of big nasty diseases out there which are more like the plague, and they take out your harvest, everything you've worked hard for over the course of the season, and you don't want that to be you. So you want to watch out for some of those big nasty diseases, and I'm going to share with you in just a moment what those are. So the one way that you can prevent that from happening to you over time is, you don't want these big nasty diseases to build up in your soil, and they can live there for years. And so I'm going to switch over to my slides now and show you what you can do as you decide what to plant where, when you're thinking about your crop rotations for this year and next year, what you can do to prevent some of these big nasties from coming your way. So I wanted to introduce you to my one crop rotation rule to help you avoid some of those big nasty diseases. So when we ask the question, what should I plant where, and we're talking about our crop rotations from year to year, the important question is, what kinds of crops should we be grouping together, and what crops should we be separating each year in order to prevent diseases from spreading throughout our growing space, and some of these, particularly the diseases that wipe out entire crops. So there are many different diseases, and I'm going to introduce you to just three, and this will help us understand why a particular style of crop rotation works. So first of all, introduce you to black rot on cabbage family plants. So cabbage family are plants like cabbage, kale, and collards. So within a family is often susceptible to the same diseases. And so in this case, black rot shows up as V-shaped yellow to brown spots on the leaves, and you can see that here, as well as the black ring that shows up in the stem. And what's nasty about this particular disease is that once you contract this disease, and you may have got it from bad seedlings from a bad source, or other ways, once you get this, it lives in your soil, and you need to not plant this family back into the same bed for several years. So that's what's nasty about this particular disease, is that if you were to plant cabbage into the same place next year, then you're going to get the same disease, and you don't want that to happen. Second disease I want to introduce you to is late blight on the tomato family. And there's lots of different tomato diseases. This is just one, and it shows up with these dark black spots on the fruit and on the stems, and also has discoloration on the leaves. And what's particularly nasty about this disease is that, let's say you were to have your tomatoes, they got late blight, and some of the tomatoes, let's say you had cherry tomatoes, were to have fallen onto the ground and release their seeds into the ground, you can get volunteer tomato plants that will grow up from those seeds next year, and in that same bed you'll end up with that same disease spreading from year to year. So this is something that you want to avoid, and so this is for the tomatoes. And then another family very susceptible to diseases, the cucumber family in particular. Cucumbers very susceptible to bacterial wilt, which essentially a lot of times the beetles, the cucumber beetles, will contract the disease, and then they will chew on your plants and they will spread this disease throughout your plants, and they will wither and they will die. And this is what that looks like. One way to tell if you have bacterial wilt on your cucumbers is this image in the middle lower, the black image in the middle lower section. If you cut through the stem, you'll see this kind of like tendrily frothy stuff emerge. And so when cucumber beetles sometimes can overwinter in the soil, and so this is a disease that can come back the next year and stay in your soil through the beetle larva. So you want to avoid planting this in the same place again. So when you ask what should I plant where, my recommendation is always to have at least 3 distinct planting beds to rotate through these families of crops, and even potentially a 4th and a 5th, so that you can try to lengthen the number of years between the time when tomatoes are planted in the same bed. It's optimal if you can get at least 3 years in between, and 5 years is even better. So let's say you have 3 beds. Then you can basically plant one bed will be all the tomato family, which includes peppers and eggplant and potatoes even potentially. And then in a second bed, you plant your cabbage family, kale, collards, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, whatever it is that you want to plant in that family. The third bed being a cucumber bed. And then what you can do is basically the next year, you just shift the beds over, and the tomato family moves over into where the cabbage family was, the cabbage family moves over to where the cucumber family was, and the cucumber moves over to the tomato family. Now, optimally, I would recommend having a 4th bed where you could rotate in between the cucumber and the tomato, because cucumber and tomato families sometimes get the same diseases. And so it's good to have another rotation in between them. So maybe you have a bed that's full of chard and lettuce, and you rotate through that before you move into the tomatoes. So that's my basic 1 crop rotation rule that really helps to lower the risk of some of those big nasty diseases. And I've got plenty of more. There's actually 25 more prevention strategies that you can practice now to prevent pests and diseases. We're starting at the start of the season here, and we want to do things right do things right now. These are critical things in order to prevent us from getting diseases later. So that's why this is important. And so if you want to take a deeper dive, check out the course at bkfarmyards.com/pestfree. Thanks for tuning in. See you on the next video.